When Washington first took his office, he did so reluctantly. He didn't want to be another King George. And at the end, he agreed to become a head of state of a new nation and took a humble title of president. After his 2 terms, he decided to not run again and retired at his farm. When John Adams, the second president, took over the presidency, it happened peacefully with no bloodshed in the age of tyrants and absolutist monarchs. He set a precedent of peaceful transfer of power, and I believe this precedent has been broken. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Today we will be talking about why Trump is bad for America, and I think mostly focusing on January 6th, the events that led up to it, and what I believe a lot of people either don't know about what has happened, and um, and also don't realize the significance of what has happened. Just a quick disclaimer. We are students of objectivism. We try to apply the principles of Ayn Rand's philosophy to the best of our abilities. And while we might disagree on specific politics, I think there is a certain amount of sort of leeway or basically understandable views when it comes to voting for a certain person. But we won't be specifically talking about voting. We'll talk about just one aspect of one of the candidates. Uh, so originally, I wanted it to be a bit more general episode, and when I sent that idea to Alejandro, he said, "I think there is a one thing that's more important to talk about," and I agreed with him, and I think it will make for a much better episode. So, joining me today is Alejandro. Hasn't been on in a while. It's always great to have him. So, Alejandro, what do you think is the basically the central issue when it comes to let's say your problem with Trump or basically what has happened?
Well, let's recap 4 years ago. You had essentially the Biden Trump election, and um, Trump refused to concede the victory when the ballots came out, and then he pressured several people to um, vote against the electors to vote against what they had decided, what the in the elections had been decided to vote for them. Then he, in Twitter and in several other media, he continued to rant against the um, the election, and he considered that a fraud had been committed on the day that things were about to be accepted and ratified. There was this march, and essentially people entered into the Capitol. One could say that Trump wasn't the intellectual mind behind those attacks, but certainly he instigated them, and he didn't. Um, he wasn't tough against them until the end. Um, I'm certainly not an expert on the matter, and I don't know the full details on what happened, but the general things that happened over there are very clear. And the fact that a transition of power wasn't considered, a peaceful transition of power wasn't considered, that you had violence happening over there was such a bad precedent in the US that I think one should be um, very wary of what happened and what is going to happen going forward. The thing that puts me very uneasy is that whenever, if you see historically the pattern on what has happened in republics or better countries that fall into chaos and then into anarchy and then um, authoritarianism, what you see is a wave and a pattern of very good institutions falling into chaos, and mostly because force is considered to be one of the many tools that people can assert to get into power. You mentioned Washington and his thorough achievement into getting into power back in the day. But remember that Washington was a fierce um, admirer of Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus was the greatest hero in Roman history, the guy who came over into power twice, had the powers of the dictator, and then he retreated both those times to go back into to become a farmer. And he, for a good while, he was admired as such, as a representation of what a good Republican is. It wasn't until you started to see the populares in the and with the Gracchi, where the supposed defenders of the Republic started to become really violent against them, and started to think that killing members of the government was a good idea, that you started to see the fallout of the Roman Republic. And of course, the two main killers over there are Sulla, which incidentally is one of the pro Republic, or supposedly one of the pro Republic people over there, and of course, Julius Caesar. And what I'm worried is that a similar precedent is established if people do not fiercely condemn what happened on 4 years ago.
Yeah, you brought up the example of Cincinnatus, and the first time I've heard about that, it really, it was incredible to read about. And from my understanding, is that was sort of that this sort of civic, I think they would even call it civic duty or civic responsibility, was sort of like a big Roman virtue that basically, yeah, you like Cincinnatus, who's a farmer, he goes in, he pretty much gets dictatorial powers because that's what sort of the Roman system allowed for a short period. He quickly destroyed the enemies of Rome in the ways it had to do, and then basically giving up the power. He could have tried to basically become sort of like a Roman emperor, yet he gave up the power because he didn't want to. He didn't want the power. That was the sort of the civic responsibility was already finished, so that's why he went. And so just quickly to people in the chat, I'm definitely if you have any comments, I definitely want to read them out because I think there is also a lot of misinformation when it comes to January 6th. And I think I'm currently decently knowledgeable about especially the misinformations. So I'd like to cover as much ground as we possibly can. So something I would like to also build on that is I think something that bothered me for a while is this idea that and one of my friends recently mentioned it, this idea that we are sort of electing our leaders, that basically these people are sort of like supposed to almost like rule over us. And I always found it like a problematic thing because I don't know if you know the name of the party in Ukraine that Zelensky is leading. It's called Servant of the People, because that's sort of what an elected official he is. He is the servant of the people. He's not someone who's supposed to rule over people. He's someone who has a responsibility towards their citizens. Um, Anything you want to say on that, or can I go into basically what led up to January 6th?
Bring it over, please.
Uh, so just quickly, someone mentioned posting ballots, that a lot of posted ballots came in just suddenly. So just quickly about that. Basically, in the run-up to the election, what we've seen is Donald Trump has been saying that the election is going to be rigged, that there's going to be that mail-in ballots are going to be rigged. He has been denying sort of the outcome of an election before it even happened. Basically, already, from what I believe, basically preparing grounds for the case in case he doesn't win. And instead of fixing those problems, instead of trying to do something with the mail-in ballots, making sure they are more safe or anything, he didn't pursue any solution to the problems. The only thing he did is criticize them because again, it wasn't a surprise that a lot of mail-in ballots were for Democrats. First of all, it was a COVID era, so and also Democrats were much more likely to not go to actual an election but stay home and instead mail in their ballot, as well as Republicans were very much discouraged from using mail-in ballots since Trump has been talking about them. Many of Republicans were afraid to even use mail-in ballots, worrying about that basically something is gonna be done to them. So that's sort of an answer to the mail-in ballots. Then Trump generally just has been, as I've said, spreading what I believe is a lot of misinformation when it comes to election, talking about that, yeah, basically it's going to be stolen, not providing any evidence, not giving any evidence. And many people around him were spreading similar things. I think, for example, Rudy Giuliani has been sort of spreading the same thing. It's going to be stolen. It's going to be stolen. They don't have any evidence, but that's sort of the only thing that has been put through.
And
Yeah.
assume that you have very good evidence that maybe fraud is going to be committed, or that after the fact you have evidence that it was committed. The answer is not pull a lot of people into Washington and show them your fist so that they are threatened, which was one of the positions of the leaders that convoked the march back in January 6th. What you should do is instead is to use the institutional case, and in any case, you should challenge the election legally, institutionally, not try to overthrow the overall system or use any kind of force against it.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a first time that there's been an alleged fraud in an election. I mean, especially on the scale of America, that it's a lot of different. You have a lot of voting booths. You have a lot of votes. It's you have to ensure security. It's definitely something. It's not unbelievable to imagine that some fraud might happen, but again, as you've said, what you do when it comes to that, similar to we might not solve every murder in America. Some people might go free, but you don't then okay, I don't want to bring example of a different country, but you don't just go around shooting random people because you think that maybe they are murderers. There are systems that we have to accept. There are institutions that have to be respected if you want to live in a civil society, if you want to live in a civilized society. So then I definitely want to bring up before, again, we even go to January 6th, because I think that was sort of like the climax of what has been plotting, but it hasn't been the start. So many people don't know. Basically, there was a plot that was devised to change the result of the electoral college with what is called an alternative slate of electors that were so just a quick explanation on what that means. Basically, many people might already know what you have in America is electoral college. Basically, you don't have a popular election. You have a bunch of local or sort of state level elections all over the place in every state. And it just happened that all the states decided to do a popular election in the state itself. So what happens is the legislature in those states will, when it comes to what's called the slate of electors, basically they approve the people who will then go on to their respective legislatures, and they are the ones who are sort of picking the president. So there was one case in the past where I just want to quickly bring up in 1960, there was an election between Richard Nixon and JFK, and there was a case where alternative slate of elector was approved. Basically, what happened in Hawaii is the state, basically the election in the state of Hawaii was only won by 200 votes. So it was very clear there's going to be a recount. So what the Hawaii legislature did is they approved two slate of electors, and then when the recount is done, they would choose the slate of electors, basically Republicans or Democrats, based on who won the recount. So basically that was the thing. Something similarly Trump tried to do, But so they tried to do it in the state of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and New Mexico. Basically, if all those were approved, the alternative ones for Republicans, Donald Trump would win an election. The problem here was that none of these were approved by the legislature of the respective states, which is a requirement. So basically, this plot was supposed to take this alternative slate of electors and let um, uh, Mike Pence, who's the vice president, who is the basically the I don't know what's the right word. I think the speaker for the Senate. Uh, he is the one who is actually basically he's has sort of the ceremonial position of saying yes, we are confirming this election. So what Mike Pence was supposed to do, according to this plot, is take this alternative slate of electors and basically make Trump president. This would 100% go to the Supreme Court because it's a crazy thing to do. And it would end most likely in 9-0 against Trump. He would definitely not go through. But this challenge, this bogus legal theory, basically just trying to do something like that is, I think, so unprecedented and so clear a violation of, well, first of all, violation of actual laws, but also violation of, as I've talked about this at the start, the sort of the spirit of peaceful transfer of power. That you lose an election, you might try to challenge it. There were challenges in the past, but at the end of the day, when those challenges don't go anywhere, you say, I concede, and I congratulate, in this case, Joe Biden for his presidency, and hope for the best. For people who try to bring up Hillary Clinton when it comes to this example, I recommend looking into when she conceded the election, and especially what speech she gave after she conceded the election, because I think that's something we definitely should have seen.
And
Alejandro?
and again, there are two things. One is how Trump. One is how people reacted to these revelations or these allegations that the election had been stolen, and the other one is how Trump reacted. And in your second comment, you were talking about how he reacted, and he, instead of saying, "Okay, let's try to see the constitutional means, the precedents we have for this, and what we can do to make our case, if any," which I think he had no case to make. Let me be clear. But if he had so, he should have been using the Constitution at his utmost respect. And what you saw instead is, one, he tried to nudge people, and in some cases more than nudging, for uh, changing their decisions in respect to that, to act against the Constitution. And that's one part. And the other one is how he reacted with, one, the protest, and then when the protest became an attack, what he did. And in essence, what we know is he was very quiet. It wasn't until the attack was neutralized that he said something, and that's very, very wary. Someone that looks like he's waiting for an attack to be perpetrated to decide on which side he's on. By the way, that's very, very Trumpy. But you should be also very wary of what kind of character this person has.
Yeah, so let's we have 10 last minutes. I think it's a good time. Let's talk about January 6th itself. So basically, when it comes to sort of certifying the election, it's basically a ceremonial thing. It's you have a session in the Senate. Mike Pence, the vice president, is leading the session, and it's basically as I've said, just a ceremonial thing. It doesn't really hold. It's a symbolic almost. Um, so what has happened in leading up to the January 6th, I think when it comes to specific tweets, and I really recommend like looking at the tweets Trump did on both Twitter and his own platform, Truth Social. And also the timeline, because I think the timeline is very important. What was said when? So Trump planned a rally just, I think, not far away from the Capitol. Before January 6th, he asked his vice president to accept those fake electors. When it was clear that Pence pretty much said no, he doesn't think there is any large scale fraud, and he will not accept the fake electors. He will ratify the election, and he will make Biden the new president. I used the word leader again; it's so used. Uh, as soon as that became clear, he started calling Mike Pence a traitor. When, if you look at the January 6th footage, which again I recommend, when people were going through the through the Capitol, you could hear people yelling "Hank Pence." You could hear terrible things also about, and now her name is completely dropping from my memory.
Pelosi.
Yeah, Pelosi. Um, and something uh, that has happened, because many people say that basically it wasn't a big deal because the election was still ratified. Basically, it didn't change anything. But the fact is that the session had to take place at a different time. They had to put it away because of what happened. So while you might say nothing fundamentally changed, something did fundamentally change. It was supposed to be a peaceful transfer of power, and it wasn't. It was breaking into. It had to be taken at a different time, and there was something actually, which again I think Mike Pence really showed. And when he comes as a politician, he's probably but his values concerned are probably pretty bad. He is like I think he's like crazy on abortion. He's crazy on many things, but I think he is a Republican that sort of we've basically lost now, and it's the Republicans who actually have who put Constitution before the people. And I think now with Trump's new people he's going to bring in, I think there's uh, any respect for constitution is very much going to be lacking, and that's one thing I'm really afraid for if he wins when it comes to the next 4 years. Basically, to what extent will they actually even try to uphold the constitution, which should be the main thing that binds a president.
I I agree, and that's something that you should be that I would be worried about, and also the fact that this is an appendix from a comment I made earlier. Several countries which descended into authoritarianism. One of the things that you see are failed coups, um, attempts of the leader which is going to become or a faction of the leader that is going to become the ruler makes an attempt um, of violence. And the starkest example that I have of that in recent times is Venezuela. Hugo Chavez tried to um, make a coup, um, which was failed, but I think the Venezuelan society thought didn't think thoroughly about that. And despite that, Chavez was an outsider for a while. He returned and he took full control of power, partially because the violence, the use of violence had been established as a valid political means to achieve power. And again, I think that's one of the things that I'm really um, afraid of.
Um, so I think we've covered most of what I wanted to say. So I just want to finish on I think something that really has, I think, really damned the Republican Party is now they pretty much all deny that the election was won by Biden. Trump, when, or I should say, when the vice presidential debate happened, there was a question on JD Vance, do you acknowledge the 2020 election? And he couldn't say anything. He couldn't uh, he couldn't acknowledge it, and that's scary. When you know, elections are the only thing we really have when it comes to sort of like a direct change when it comes to, in this case, the head of state. When that is being thrown out of the window, the only way to change is by political force, is by violence. That is, once that is gone, you don't have anything else. And so since I talked a little bit about people around Trump, and I definitely recommend even checking someone like Ben Shapiro one day after January 6th, what he said and what he's saying now, and you'll see basically after one day after, he said it was a clear insurrection. And we back then we didn't even have as much information as we have now, because a lot of facts came out after the January 6th was properly investigated. um, but just quickly, when the break-in happened, I just want to read a couple of people talking about Trump. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, she said that at 2:28, that was, I believe, 1 hour after people broke in to the Capitol grounds, she said, "Mark, I was told there is an active shooter on the first floor of the Capitol. Please tell the president to calm the people. This isn't the way to solve everything." Then you have Laura Ingraham. "Hey, Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us." Mick Mulvaney, "Mark, he needs to stop this now. Can I do anything to help?" Donald Trump Jr., "He's got to condemn this shit as soon as possible. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough." Former White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, "Tell them to go home now." Former White House Strategic Communications Director Ali Safara, "President has to come out firmly and tell protesters to dissipate. Someone is going to get killed." And of course, some people might know Ashley Babbitt has been actually killed. During that, Trump has said nothing. Trump said at 6 p.m. that people should go home. He said that 5 hours after people breached the Capitol grounds. He said that 3.5 hours after Ashley Babbitt has been killed. And he said that basically while everyone was telling him, please tell them to go home now. The only thing he said, the only thing Trump said before that was stay there. He said something like stay peaceful. He said something like stay calm, but they've already breached the Capitol. Already someone was killed. And when someone is killed and people are already in the Capitol, saying stay calm is not going to achieve anything. They are already not calm. After he said go home, they did dissipate. But I think something fundamental has already been broken. The fact that the certification of the election has been postponed, not even talking about the whole plot to actually overturn the election. And nothing from this was ever acknowledged. Just quickly, I want to read some super chats. We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. We have a super chat from Robert. Thank you so much. He says, January 6th is just one event, albeit the worst, in a long list of reasons why the cult of Trump, which has replaced the Republican Party, must be rejected. And also another super chat from Robert. He says, one candidate is vicious, statist, altruist, collectivist, versus a power-hungry, narcissistic, dishonest, lecherous, felonious, adulterous, dictator, envious, childish name-calling, insurrectionist bully. Alejandro, any last words?
Not really. Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss this, and Daniel.
So thank you everybody for watching. For Americans out there, tomorrow is the election. Maybe some of you were probably already voted. Either way, I hope I really hope for the next 4 years, whoever is president are gonna be the best possible we can get. But we've clearly talked about the problem with one of them. Alejandro, thank you for joining me. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We have the reality show coming up in just about a minute. We'll be talking about why your child supports Hamas. So there's been a new report from the Free Press about some of the unions in California and what they've been basically trying to do when it comes to teaching their children. So make sure to check that out. Uh, Thank you and bye bye.